Well, a good public space is really a lot about how people feel in it. They feel good, they feel comfortable, they feel relaxed enough, they look in other people's eyes, and they kind of talk to each other even though they may not know each other. So it's something that's really deeper inside you, the feeling that you have. And when you come into a good space, you relax and you start opening up. And people can watch you. You know, the best part of a public space is watching other people. But people are watchable when they're comfortable. You know, they're natural. So it's being natural in a natural environment that you feel good in means that you're in a good place. And that could be in your home. I mean, that's probably where you are most. But it can be on a street corner. It can be in a park. But it also may be very bad to be on the street corner because the traffic's too much. So there are places where people naturally go to feel good and to feel in a good public space. Some parts of the world, a public space can only be for public use, meaning there's no private uses. I don't buy that. What we think is that a public space has multiple layers of uses. And as long as they're local and that they're people that you know and feel comfortable being around, it's a good public space. A good public space is a place where people can come in and try something new. They can try a new business. They can set up an evening market or night market. They can set up some games. I mean, they can do public or private things in those spaces so that it has more reasons to be there. A big open field may be good for soccer and frisbee or football, whatever it is, but the really good places are on the edge where people can do all kinds of things. And that could be a barbecue or it could be a kiosk selling bratwurst. You know, the big thing about a public space is comfort. Do you feel safe? Do you feel secure? Do you feel like you can naturally connect with other people? So, you know, and then access is another one. And then comfort and sociability. So, and the kind of uses that you can do there. If the variety of uses has a big impact. When you go into a place, you have a variety of things to do that sort of give you pleasure. And you feel happy or comfortable. Happiness is a big deal. In a good place and with other people. So you find yourself smiling, you find yourself relaxed, as I say, I mean, the big deal is actually looking people in the eye and in a sense talking to them. If you're afraid, you don't look at people. Well, this was a really interesting for us is because, you know, we know an awful lot about public spaces, but we realized that the experts of a public space are in the community because they deal with it every day. So they know a lot more than they realize how much they know. So we came up with these 11 principles, and the first principle is the community is the expert. And they're the expert because they walk in that place, they're there, they know all kinds of things, they're just not sure exactly how much they do know. And if you can set up a process for them to be able to talk about what they know and what they would like to do, you've opened the door for creating a good public space. So the first one, the community is the expert. The second is you're creating a place, not just a design. So the place is that place that is important to you. And then you can't do it alone. And then if they say it can't be done, it doesn't always work out that way. Because a lot of the professionals are there to do it for you, to you. And what we're saying is, no, you don't get good results that way. The people in the community are the experts. And if you can find a process for getting them to talk about what they would like to do in that place, through a game we do, then you learn all kinds of things. And that's how you create a public space, is do the things that they would like to do in that space. What we do is we have a game, we call it the place game. And we ask people to evaluate a place in terms of comfort and image, access and linkage, activities and uses, and sociability. And there's some subcategories in that. So they can actually do an evaluation of their own place. And a man might do something different than a woman, a child might do something different than a grandmother, and those are all okay, because when you realize that people have different feelings about a place, the same place, even though they all live in the same neighborhood, you start to learn about what the different values are, the different ways that people might want to use it. So you realize you know something, but you also realize that these other people know something. So you set up that process, and then you ask people, well, what do you like most about it, and then what would you do in the short term to make that work? So we break people down into groups of 4 or 5, maybe 6, but not more than that, and people then talk about what they'd like to do in the short term, and they talk about how they evaluated it. So all of a sudden people are talking about things that are really important to them, because otherwise there's no structure to do it. So this is a simple structure where they get to talk about what they want to do in that place. So what we do is we take people out into the place, we break it down, say it's a park, we break it down into 5 or 6 depending on places, and people then do an analysis and an evaluation and a brainstorming about what they do in that. And they come back in, and if there's 5 groups, there are 5 groups for different parts of the place, and they all come up with a plan, and you have a plan of activation in 3 hours. And you can start implementing by doing things. So it's not a design. Remember, we're talking about this is really about what you do in that place. And that's why we're saying you're creating a place, not just a design. And then you can't do it alone, so that's pretty clear. And then if they say it can't be done, because what happens is the professionals, the government has set up around the disciplines that have delivered bigger streets, more anonymous public spaces, and people don't want anonymity. They want to have a recognition that that this is their place and that they can use it. When you break a public space down into different sections, it's harder to come up with something off the wall, because you're looking at a particular place that might be an entranceway, and then you start thinking of what you do at an entranceway. Or there's something there like a playground, and you figure out what you'd like to do around the playground. And maybe some of those ideas will come up, but you can also, what you're really looking for is what we call lighter, quicker, cheaper. Something you can do immediately. And so you can filter through some of these ideas and begin to find a way to put various things together. Because the other big idea is triangulation. If you just have, say, a playground, and that's all you have, but if you have a playground next to a dog run, next to a library, next to a coffee shop, everyone's going to come there every day. So then you're going to have all of these things being used far more than they would be if they weren't there. So it's getting people excited about these different uses, putting them together, really creates a great place. What we really want from people is what would they like to be doing in a place. Not just some off the wall like a basketball court or something like that. That can come into it later, and maybe it is part of it, but you really want those sort of small social spaces that give people a real reason to be there. You see, the thing about doing experiments is you can be wrong. And when you realize that you can make a mistake, you're free. You see, if you figure out you have to just wait until you're absolutely sure about everything, you'll never do anything. So the lighter, quicker, cheaper is you'll come up with 3 or 4 ideas and you'll try them. And maybe 2 of them don't work, but one works and then it becomes something else. So you're sort of taking a circuitous path to get to greatness. And you don't know what you're going to do next. And that sort of reveals itself as you do these things. So lighter, quicker, cheaper is a very fast way of getting to a great outcome. Well, we worked in Detroit. One of the big stories in cities around the world is what happened to Detroit in the last 5 years. And we did a big program of lighter, quicker, cheaper. And one of the lighter, quicker, cheaper things we put into downtown Detroit was a beach and a beer garden right in the center of Detroit. And that absolutely blew everyone away, because a beach, everyone wants to be around a beach, and everyone wants beer, and and then other things start to happen, and so you've got this amazing mix, and it's busy morning, noon, and night. So that was a gold mine of success, and it happened very quickly. And what Detroit is today, 5 years later, is unbelievable how big an impact these lighter, quicker, cheaper things have on transforming that city. What people, they crave the opportunity to do different things. They're just not going to go out to do one thing. And if you have a street and the only thing you have on that street is a coffee shop and nothing else, you're not going to go that often to the coffee shop. But if you have 3 or 4 things, and a restaurant, a small grocery store, a place to get your hair cut, a library, all of a sudden you've got a reason to go there. Well, if you have 10 reasons, you're really at a critical mass. So when you look at a street, are there 10 places along a street, a big street, where you have 10 things to do? You're going to be there every day. But if you only have a street where there's one thing to do, it's dead. So it's bringing those uses. People go to do things. They don't go to look at a building. They go to be part of something. And when you go to a city where people are just looking at buildings, that's not a real city. An architect has to realize that the community is they're experts in many things that the architect has no knowledge of. And so if an architect comes in with their idea, it's either dead on the arrival, or it's maybe they do it because the community doesn't know what to say, and then you'll end up tearing it out 5 years later, and 15 years later you'll redo it. So some of these award-winning designs are ones that are big failures. And so that's a failed approach. But the real approach is where the community has a very strong say, where the architect as a designer can fill in these ideas in ways that together they can look at it. So the architect is more like a therapist than he is a surgeon. And so you really need good therapy, and you need to be humble as a designer, because these people know a lot, and you need to respect it. So it's more like a craft than it is about some identity, that visual identity or something. Those are just, they don't work. These iconic buildings are dead buildings in cities where people look at them and they don't go in them very much. So you really need a building, like the architect should not design the bottom 3 floors of a building. Those should be designed by someone who understands retail and public use. And so that's a big deal for a community, and it's hard for architects to take that in. Humility, listening, park your ego at the door, become a resource and a facilitator and an enabler, and work with a community over 5 years, and be part of that, and do that in a number of communities. You can really reshape a whole city or town with that kind of an approach, and you can see changes immediately.